Again, hi everyone. We are going to have our last talk this year with Mahyar Hadighi. We have Farzad Hashemi, our former president of GREED, as our moderator today. I'm going to mute myself. I'll let Farzad start the session. Thank you everyone for joining us. Farzad.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for Mahyar's lecture. It's my pleasure to be the moderator of this session. Mahyar has been a friend of colleague of mine for almost 3 years since the first day I started my PhD here at Penn State. And I would like to use this opportunity to appreciate all his help and advice during my study. We all miss you, Mahyar, so much here in Stockman School. Mahyar Hadighi is an architect, historic preservationist, educator, and researcher whose professional background includes education, research, practice, and teaching in both Iran and the United States. He received his PhD in architecture from Penn State with a focus on hybridity in architectural design in mid-20th-century US college towns. For his master's degree in historic preservation planning from Cornell University, he concentrated on documenting and analyzing local mid-century domestic architecture. In pursuing his professional Master of Architecture degree from Azad University of Tehran, he gained a background in modern practice and contextualization in architectural design. As a practitioner, researcher, and educator, Mahyar concentrates on modernism understood in relation to historic and contemporary contexts. In particular, he documents local adaptations of modern architecture, which he then analyzes with computational design methodologies in order both to preserve them as characteristic of place and to consider them for additional locales and purposes. Mahyar joined the College of Architecture at Texas Tech in 2019 to develop and lead a Master of Science degree in architecture concentrating on historic preservation and design. Supported by Texas Tech in both Lubbock and El Paso external institution and also local, national, and international stakeholders, Mahyar focuses on preserving the cultural history of the local context in the US-Mexico border city of El Paso. Prior to joining the COA, Mahyar taught courses ranging from history and theory of architecture and preservation to architectural design at Penn State, Virginia Commonwealth University, and James Madison University in the US. He also pursued research and teaching at Marduk University in Iran, where he served as director of the undergraduate architecture program. So we are pleased to have him with us today, and his lecture titled The Twilight Zone, Practice, Research, Pedagogy, Pursuing an Academic Career in the Field of Architecture. So before I pass the screen to Mahyar to start his lecture, I would like to mention that we have the Q&A session at the end. So if you have any questions, you can either raise your hand and ask it personally, or you can put it on chats and we will try to read them. As Ali mentioned, we're going to record this lecture. So I hope you don't have any problem with that. So Mahyar, I can't wait anymore to listen to your lecture. So I'll pass the screen to you, and thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Farzad, for that interesting introduction. And thank you, Ali, and other members of GRID. Let me share my screen. Can you see it? Okay, great. So I'm very, very happy and pleased to be here today in this virtual room with so many familiar faces. I just saw that even Eduardo joined the presentation, and something happened. Probably he left. But the talk is towards people who are looking for having a career in the field of architecture, like a academic career in the field of architecture. Of course, everyone want to stay in the field of architecture, but having an academic career. So I try to talk about this idea of being in a twilight zone where all of you are now, or most of you, thinking about practicing research and pedagogy in the field of architecture, thinking about finishing your PhD or MS in architecture, and the next step for MS might be PhD, might be working in industry, in academia, and also for people in the PhD program thinking about the future, postdoc, working in industry and working academia. And I should say that I totally understand the way in which you're thinking. And I also, I actually chose this, the title, the Twilight Zone, because kind of having a kind of a sympathy with all of you, because I know that this is not easy to be in that position, to think about future and not know how to do it and where to go, and if you can do it or not. So these are all things that you have in mind. I see Julio is also joined the talk. So basically, I would like to talk about this Twilight Zone practice, research, and pedagogy first, and then directly talk about how to apply and what to expect in terms of applying for academic positions. I try to leave time for question and answers, because that would be very important in this talk. My talk is very generic. It's not about a particular person or a particular position or how to apply for a particular position. So I would be happy to answer questions at the end, and I would be happy to work with everyone afterwards to shed the light anywhere in your research or job hunting. Most of you know me. For those who don't know me, I would like to give you a little bit of background about myself and about grit, because that's very important in the way in which I see pursuing academic career in architecture. So as part of the first cohort in architecture PhD at Penn State, you see the whole cohort here, my classmates from top to bottom, left to right: Clarissa Albrecht, Lacey Goldberg, myself, Stephen Mainzer, Vernel Noel, and Dario Vanegas. So we were part of this first cohort. We were all designers coming from field of architecture and landscape architecture from the design perspective. And we were in a PhD program thinking about how to connect research and design. We were kind of in the twilight zone from the beginning. So we were thinking of how to design research and how to research design. And these were kind of dilemmas for not only for us, but for everyone in the environment, in the architecture school. So we decided to put together this organization, Graduate Research and Innovative Design, to make a platform to connect this idea of design and research together. It's interesting to say that from the first cohort, from all these people that you see here, everyone at the moment pursuing academic career. Clarissa is in Brazil, working academia. Lacey and Stephen both are at Penn State in the Department of Landscape Architecture. I'm at Texas Tech. Vernel is in University of Florida, and Dario is Bogota, Colombia. So you see the need of talking about how to connect research and design in order for people to be able to continue thinking about this. I'm not suggesting that everyone coming through a PhD program or everyone coming to PhD at Penn State and going through GRID should go to academia and should continuing being in the environment that thinking about research and design altogether. But I'm saying that this is an important part of the discipline. I'm sure, especially for many of people in this room working in SCDC, industry would be a better option because you can make more money, definitely. So that would be something that you all may think about it, but um, you still need to think about this idea of design, research, design, all together. So from the moment that you left the um, professional basically programs like Bachelor of Architecture or Master of Architecture or Master of Landscape Architecture, and coming to a post-professional or a research-based degree, either Master of Science or PhD, you're thinking about this dilemma between research and design in the intersection. I'm sure everyone in this room knows Lucas Kalisparis. He retired last year from Penn State. He was teaching 512A, one of the main courses for the PhD program. And so we were all fresh coming to the PhD program, proud of ourselves. We went to this course. This was our first course, 512A, talking about theory, talking about research methods and all these things that you need to put together, research and design together. So in the first day, Lucas told us something that I would like to tell everyone because I think that's very important. Lucas basically told us that, okay, you guys are in PhD program and you think that everything is done. And this idea of never-ending workload in academia actually started from when you were in Bachelor of Architecture degree. You were doing Bachelor of Architecture or Master of Architecture, the professional degree, and you were thinking that, okay, this is crazy. The workload is crazy. I'm tired. I can't wait to finish this and to be more focused, to be in a research-based degree. And then you apply and you go to a Master of Science program, a post-professional degree. In a Master of Science program, you say, wow, this is crazy. Lots of work. We have to do everything in only 2 years. This is not fair. PhD students have like more time. They have like 6 years, 5 years, 4 years to do the same thing. This is crazy. And then you said, okay, I want to be more focused. I want to go to a PhD program. You apply and you get accepted to a PhD program and you be a PhD student. Then you said, oh, this is crazy. Lots of work. I have to take coursework. I have to think about my proposal. I have to do my, I don't know, comprehensive exam, the other exam, candidacy exam, all these things. And you were saying that if I finish the comprehensive exam, then everything will be fine and I will be relieved. Then you do your comprehensive exam and you be an ABD student, and then you say, oh, this is so hard. I have to think about PhD. I have to think about basically pleasing my advisors. I have to write the dissertation. I have to do the research, everything all at once. This is crazy. If I get my PhD, everything would be fun afterwards. You get your PhD and you say, now what? I have to like search for a job. I want to be a faculty member. All these lazy faculties, they don't do anything. They just like come to class, teach a course, and they're done. I wanted to go to a tenure track. And then you apply and you get a tenure track job. You be an assistant professor. And then you say, wow, this is crazy. I have still to do my research and I have to write papers and I have to teach and I have to do service and I have to work. I have to do this, do that. And I have to like think about many different things. And this is basically a kind of slavery in academia. So if I get my tenure and be associate professor, then everything will be fine. Then you get your tenure, you will be associate professor, and then you said, oh, this is not over yet. I have to work harder even to be able to get my professorship. So then you work harder and harder to get to be a full professor, and then you can say, okay, I'm a little bit relief now. I have a little bit of time, but that's basically the time that you're thinking about retirement, and then you will be retired. So this was the first thing that Lucas told us, and I believe it's absolutely true. So if you're coming to Penn State to do your Master of Science, believe me that you're going through all these things. If you're already done with Master of Science, you're in a PhD program, you still have lots to do. I'm in the middle, and I've still like have many things to do. So this is kind of crazy, but it's fun. It's all fun because as designers, you're thinking about research, and this idea of research and design, for me, I think it's very fun. Um, as I was mentioning, if you do your professional degree and go to practice, you can only focus on practice area. But if you come to a post-professional degree, you're part of the research. And most probably you think about pedagogy. Either you want to go to academia to be a teacher afterwards, or even if you want to go back to industry and work, you're not like necessarily thinking about practicing as a professional architect, but you're thinking about more connecting practice and research, and practice and pedagogy, and research and pedagogy. So I believe whoever comes to the post-professional degree, either MS or PhD, are in kind of intersection between practice, research, and pedagogy. It's not possible to leave one without another. If you wanted to leave one without another, I would say you have to like stop with your professional degree and just be an architect. I think Michael can talk about that, because he was practicing architect. He wasn't a practicing architect, and he decided to come to do the PhD program, and now he's stuck in research and practice and pedagogy. I'm sure for him it's really hard to leave research and pedagogy and go back to practice. Anyway, so but for me, I think this is the fun part of being in academia, because you're always between research and design and teaching. But the question is, what is architectural research? So for those of you in a PhD program or finished your PhD, answering this question is very easy. But for those who are starting your master or in the master program or starting the PhD, this is a dilemma. What is actually architectural research? So I want to talk briefly about this idea. I would like to talk about architecture as a knowledge of form and as a form of knowledge. How we see architecture as a knowledge of form, how we see architecture as a form of knowledge. If architecture is a knowledge of form, if architecture is a form of knowledge. Going back to 2000 years ago, when Vitruvius put together his 10 books on architecture, he identified 3 elements necessary for a well-designed building: firmness, commodity, and delight, which is known as durability, use, and beauty. So he didn't put any emphasis on durability or use or beauty. He was saying that architect is a master builder, who has knowledge, extensive knowledge of form, of material, of construction techniques. A master builder is someone who, when touch a piece of stone, he can understand that how he want to use that stone in architecture, in building, basically define architecture as a form of knowledge, because everything was knowledge based. You have to be master of knowledge of building to be able to be an architect, to be able to form something as architecture, as building. Many years later, 1500 years later, Alberti, Leon Battista Alberti, put together another book called The 10 Books of Architecture. For him, architecture was also about durability, use, and beauty. But the way in which he talked about architecture and theoretized architecture was to put emphasis on beauty more than durability and use. So from that moment, we see a kind of a disconnection between knowledge and form. So he was introducing architecture as a knowledge of form versus form of knowledge. Um, from that point of the history, we see architects as designers on paper, and then so they would design buildings on paper, and they would solve all the problems on paper. They would do their research on the paper, and then someone else would build the building. Just seeing this differences, you can say that if you were architect, as Vitruvius was referring to, for testing something, you would need to build it, right, to test it. If you were architect, as this version, as Alberti's version, you would draw things and you would design things on paper and you would test it kind of on paper and research basically on paper to be able to give something to the contractor to test it. So your idea, your testing was on paper rather than on reality, on the field, on the site. Many architects in the 20th century, they tried to put together this gap, to cover this gap and put together architecture as a form of knowledge and architecture as a knowledge of form. The way in which Le Corbusier thought about architecture and wrote about architecture is, for me, architect as someone, as a master builder again. So he was talking about architecture and thinking about architecture as a master builder. So you have to have a mastery knowledge of the material and the new techniques. So we're not talking about techniques that were used in 2000 years ago or material that were used in 2000 years ago. We're talking about new way of using concrete, new way of using architectural systems or new architectural systems. And the way in which he described architecture was to put everything together. But again, architects like Le Corbusier were designing things on paper. So you still thinking and designing on paper, but you need to have a mastery of material, of construction techniques, of architectural systems before putting everything on paper. So we'll see in 20th century, we saw in 20th century that everything is like kind of putting back together. You all know his Maison Domino, that he talked about the way in which he was thinking about architecture, and this was totally on paper. And then you'll see that after like 10 years, after a few years, he actually designed and built Villa Savoie, which was basically based on his idea of Maison Domino. Going back to architectural research. What is architectural research? And is that a new thing? In one sense, architectural research has been conducted throughout the history of architecture, from the day one till now. The development of particular structural forms or building materials over centuries is the outcome of trial and error, experimentation, and systematic observation. For example, the development of the flying buttress in the Notre Dame in Paris, right? So architects were designing things on paper or on the reality, and they were building it and testing it, and then they were improving it. So this is a way of doing architectural research, right? So in one sense, architectural research happened from day one till now. However, the conduct of architectural research outside the boundaries of specific building project is a much more recent phenomenon. It's something that we see it in late 20th century and 21st century. It's something, and that's a reason that we didn't see PhD programs in architecture in 20th century, and most of the PhD programs in architecture are developed in 21st century. What is architectural research? For those who are or were at Penn State, I'm sure that you are all familiar with David Wang and Linda Groth and their book, Research Methods, Architectural Research Method. And also for those in landscape architecture, the architectural research by Snyder. And another book that I forgot in landscape architecture. Anyway, so the definition that most of the scholars come up with is architectural research. It's systematic inquiry directed toward the creation of knowledge. And this is something that basically everyone agrees about it. It's systematic. So any research needs to be systematic to be able to for us to be able to call it research. And then it's towards creation of knowledge. But if you read it carefully, you don't see anything about architecture or anything about design, right? This is a definition of research. It's a systematic inquiry directed towards creating of knowledge. But what about architecture? What about design? So that's when we still have dilemma, we still have problem in putting research and design in this idea of systematic inquiry. Of course, for people doing PhD or done with the PhD, this is not very hard because you're already doing something like that. But if you go a step back and think about the time that you finished architecture school, you finished design school, and you started your post-professional degree, either MS or PhD, whatever, it was hard to think about design as a systematic inquiry directed towards creating creation of knowledge or towards new knowledge. So what I'm trying to say is that we're all in same situation. Either you're just finished your professional degree, you're starting your post-professional degree, or if you're in PhD program, or if you finish your PhD program, and you're still in academic environment in like teaching architecture, you're still dealing with this kind of dilemma that, okay, where is research and what is research design? What is design research? How we can research design? How we can design research? All these things are still problematic, or not problematic, but things that you need to think about them. So for those who are starting PhD or MS, don't be scared of this. This is something that you need to deal with it for basically the rest of your life. So this idea of research and design and the differences has been part of the pedagogy of architecture. But basically talking about architectural pedagogy and architectural education in the United States, I would like to say that up until 1860, architectural education consisted entirely of completing an apprenticeship with a practicing architect. Of course, that was supplemented by reading books or traveling worldwide to see examples of classical architecture. But especially in the United States, office experience was the most common way to prepare architects practicing in the late 19th and early 20th century. As many scholars noted, office experience served as a bridge and to some extent still does between the studio and the construction site. However, almost in the mid-20th century, by 1930, there were 60 architecture programs in the United States. The and by having that many architecture programs, the practice of architecture education had kind of transitioned from the apprenticeship model to a course of study at a college or university with a formal curriculum in architecture. This formal architecture education derived from two distinct sources. You may all know them. Basically the French system of École des Beaux-Arts, which treated architecture as a fine art, and the German Polytechnic system, which treated architecture more like a technical science. Although the German method was more influential, at least in terms of the number of followers, and its influence was felt earlier, the impact of the École system in the United States is better known. In the early 20th century, the architects with the greatest prestige had studied either at École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, or at least at one of the US schools that followed the École method. You may know that in 1937, when Gropius came to United States to teach at Harvard, with that appointment, Department of Architecture at Harvard became the kind of first school training students in modernist architecture. In addition to Harvard, Mies van der Rohe came to IIT. So IIT and Harvard both were trying to teach students in modernism. But other than those two schools, it took time till the post-World War II era that other schools tried to join them in teaching architects or architecture students with modernism or with modernist methods. We also know that Frank Lloyd Wright, Taliesin was important schools in development of modernism in the United States, but he was kind of following the apprenticeship method in his fellowship. So he was working on project and he was like teaching the students at his fellowship. Anyway, so by seeing these schools teaching students about modernism, we're going back to the idea of modern architecture or modernists trying to put together the knowledge of form and the form of knowledge and trying to fill that gap. So we see that schools, in architecture schools, mostly faculty members, also students, thinking about research in a different way. While climate, product development, and building systems design were focal point of research in 1950s, research in architecture emerged more broadly across a range of topics, including socio-behavioral issues, design methods, and energy conservation in 1960s and 1970s. It was during this period that funding from federal agencies, from the National Science Foundation to the National Endowment for the Arts, became more widely available. So below you see a research that I was involved when I was at Penn State. You may still see this model in Hamer Center. I'm not sure about this, or this panel in the library. But this is about a research that a faculty member at Penn State did in late 50s. So William Hajar was a faculty at Penn State, teaching students architecture and urbanism, active researcher who was applying for funding and received many fundings from different agencies, and worked on his idea of air wall, which was a double glazed climate wall. And he was also a very active and successful practitioner in State College. So for those of you that are new to the area, he built more than 32 buildings, single family houses in the area. So If you walk through neighborhoods near the campus, you will see buildings that he designed. So you will see that from that point that in architecture schools, faculty members are not only trying to teach, but also to practice and also to research. So practicing architecture was part of being tenured in that time, but research was not an important part of being tenured. But from that period, you will see that faculty were trying to get funding from other organizations and institutions and do some research. So let's say that we want to pursue academic career in the field of architecture. And pursuing academic career in the field of architecture means to be in the center of practice, research, and pedagogy. So this is basically the second part of this talk. So what do we want to do? First of all, let me explain briefly to you the way in which academic positions are ranked in the United States. This is a general idea. In each university, you may see a little bit of differences here and there, but in general, you see two different lines for faculty hiring. One is tenure line faculty and one is non-tenure line faculty. Basically, the most important, there are two differences. One is the time, the duration of hire. When you're in a tenure line and when you be tenured, the duration is basically unlimited, so you can stay there to your retirement. And when you're in a non-tenure line, the situation is different. There is a basically duration associated to that hire. But other than that, responsibilities is also something important. When you're in a tenure line, your responsibilities including teaching, research, and service. So you have to be involved in teaching and research and service. So you are mostly familiar with the three ranks. Assistant professor must have demonstrated ability as a teacher or research worker and must have shown definitive evidence of growth in scholarly, artistic, or professional achievement. Associate professor on the higher rank should process the same qualifications. At the same time, must also provide evidences of an established reputation in scholarly, artistic, or professional achievement. The most highest rank professor should possess the same qualities, but at the same time provide evidences of substantial record of advanced research and or creative work and of leadership in his or her field of specialization. So other than the tenure line, we have non-tenure line. And for non-tenure line, most of the universities have teaching faculty or research faculty. So they highlight this as teaching assistant professor, teaching associate professor, teaching professor. At some universities, it's called teaching assistant professor. At some other universities, it's called assistant teaching professor. And then we have the tenure line, a non-tenure line related to research, research assistant professor or assistant research professor, research associate professor or research professor. So teaching assistant professor. So this is not only a non-tenure line, which is basically has a limitation in terms of duration and renewal of contract, but also most of your responsibility is towards teaching, because this is a teaching assistant professor. Must have demonstrated ability as a teacher and advisor and must have shown evidence of professional growth, scholarship, and or mastery of subject matter. This can be towards a particular subject, doesn't have to be general, but it can also be general. Teaching associate professor, same as assistant professor, but at the same time must have shown evidence of professional growth, scholarship, and or mastery of subject matter at a level of distinction beyond that of the teaching assistant professor. Same for the teaching professor, must shown evidence of professional growth, scholarship, and or mastery of subject matter at a level of distinction beyond that of the associate teaching professor. So these are basically the three levels. And the same for research faculty. So the responsibilities on this is more towards research instead of teaching and service. So you might or might not have any service responsibilities, for example, for this position. Research assistant professor must have demonstrated ability as a researcher and must have shown evidence of professional growth and scholarship in his or her discipline. For the research associate professor is the same, but of course should show evidence of professional growth beyond of the assistant research professor, and for research professor beyond the associate professor. There are other titles and positions as well, including visiting professor. So visiting professor can be visiting assistant professor, visiting associate professor, or visiting professor. This visiting is basically make that position very similar to what some universities offer as a fellowship. At some universities, this person may be called fellow, at other may be called visiting professor. So these appointments are of limited duration, usually 1 semester to 2 years. So it can be a 1 semester fellowship, it can be a year fellowship, or 2 years fellowship. So usually it's really hard to renew these positions. So in that case, you have to basically terminate this position and go to another position. So these are duration basis position. Adjunct professor, instructor, lecturer, also very common. Adjunct assistant professor, it can be adjunct associate professor or adjunct professor. The term adjunct is used to indicate that appointees, because of their expertise, will be called upon by the university for their opinions on matters of importance. So this is very important. A university, a department needs someone to teach, let's say, architecture systems. So someone can be hired as adjunct professor, adjunct associate professor, or adjunct assistant professor to teach that particular course. It's towards a particular subject. And then we have professor of practice, which is common in architecture, or at least was very common in architecture schools. It can be assistant professor, associate professor, or professor of practice. This title is limited to those individuals who are, of course, non-tenure track faculty who may not have had the traditional academic background. So this is, you can have a Bachelor of Science degree to apply for a professor of practice, because this is towards practicing of that particular discipline, in this case, practicing architecture. And it will be only towards teaching, no service or no research associated with that position. Again, distribution of work is very important. For a regular faculty in a tenure line position, you need to do research, teaching, and service. And the amount of work is basically 40% for research, 40% for teaching, and 20% for service. And that's why that to be able to apply for a position as such, you need to demonstrate that you're good at research, at teaching, and at service. So this might be a little bit tricky for especially PhD students, because PhD students are good at research. They can easily demonstrate that they can be good researchers, but you have to demonstrate that you're a good teacher and a service person as well. Applying for a faculty position. So many of you may think about applying for a position. So I would like to briefly talk about the idea of applying for a faculty position, where to start, how to start, what to do. So first question is where to start. My answer is now. When to start? Always the answer is now, regardless of where you're standing in your program, either in Master of Science or PhD, you're starting or you're finishing or you're finished the program, I would say now. So the thing is that it's very important for everyone to understand that preparation for applying for a position needs time, searching needs time, and you have to basically put that time within your PhD timeline. So this is a very generic timeline of doing a PhD. It's not about PhD in architecture, and it's not about our particular program at Penn State, but you have coursework, you need to do dissertation research, permission to write, form your committee, teaching assistantship, writing about your research, presenting your research, kind of exiting the seminars that you need to take, and first progress report to the committee, and then do your comprehensive exam. And after your comprehensive exam, you're doing your basically annual or monthly or semester meeting with your committee. And then the last would be writing and defending your thesis. So I think when you're done with your comprehensive exam, it's the time to talk with your faculty members to say that, okay, I'm considering applying for academic positions, and please help me. So a great conversation with your faculty would be, how many of your publications need to be saved for the time that you got the position? Because I believe a mistake that many people do is to publish everything before finishing the PhD, because they saying that, okay, we need to publish to get the academic job. That's true. That's absolutely true. So you need to publish enough to get your academic job. But remember, then your workload will never be stopped. So when you're, let's say, an assistant professor in a tenure line, you have to do work, you have to do research, you have to write papers. And believe me, in the first year or two, it would be really hard to do that, because you're adjusting to your new environment. You have to develop new courses, you have to advise students, and you don't have time to start a new research. So you have to have things from your PhD that you can develop for papers and publish. So that's a critical action that you need to take, and you need to think about it, and you need to talk about it with your committee members, that how many of these publications should be before finishing the PhD, and how many can be postponed to after finishing the PhD when I got a position. So I think I had a very successful conversation with my committee. They actually recommended, okay, you need to publish till this point, and the rest you can save for the first 2 years of your academic career. And I did that, and I think that was a very clever move. So think about it and talk with your faculty. That's the most important thing. How and where to search. These days, searching about positions are very easy. Most of the schools will publish the ads everywhere, basically in all available like social media, in like let's say Indeed and things like that, that you're looking for jobs. But I think these websites that you see here are kind of like must search websites. ACSA is the Association of Collegiate Schools of Architecture, and all architecture programs that part of ACSA will advertise in ACSA. So you need to go to ACSA website and you need to search that. That's definite. If you're in landscape architecture looking for landscape architecture positions, you can use the American Society of Landscape Architects website. However, for schools that are not part of the ACSA and not part of the Association of Collegiate Schools of Architecture, and you may say, oh, I don't want to apply for those schools, but why not? So you may find an interesting position in a school that is not part of the ACSA. So you have to like search for that as well. The higher ed job website also good, because they include every architecture schools. Also, architecture research centers consortium that Penn State is part of it as well. ARCC, I know that many of you were involved and are still involved in participating in that conference. ARCC has annual conference. So their website also advertise many good positions. So search for the positions. But the question is when. So if you go to these websites now, you will see a couple of positions that are recently announced in March or April. But most of the ads are coming in mid-fall, let's say, because faculty decide to retire, decide to leave schools at the end of the academic year, and schools go through the idea of putting together a search in summer, and in fall, when faculty are back to the schools, a kind of a search committee is putting together, and then the search committee will advertise for that position. And to form that search committee and to advertise, it takes a couple of months. So usually in October, you see that ads are coming out. So October is the time that you should start searching for it. However, some positions are coming in November, and most of the positions, the deadlines are in December. So basically you have a month or maybe two to put together your dossier and put together your application and apply. That's why I'm saying that from now, or at least from the end of the semester, for those of you who want to go to work in the next academic year, not this fall, but next fall, you have to start working and thinking about it, because you need to put together lots of different things. You need to have a letter of interest. You need to have your CV, your references, your portfolio, your teaching statement, your research statement, and many universities asking for a statement of diversity and inclusion. So just to put together all these, you need time. And remember, you're a PhD student or MS student, and you're having coursework, and you need to write your thesis or dissertation. So these takes time. Definitely think about it in summer when you have a little bit of more time. Put together everything and make them ready. I should say that these things are it's not that you put together one application and then you apply to like 50 schools or 50 positions. First of all, you don't find 50 positions. You may be lucky to find 2, 3, 4, 5 positions available for you. But for each position, you have to write your letter of interest and your statements separately. However, if you put together one application, then it's easier to change it and modify it for other positions. So I go briefly to each one of these items. So I need to be a little bit quicker. Letter of interest. Summarizing your teaching, research, creative activity, and service. Basically what you have done and what you will do and how you will do it should be prepared specifically for that particular position. Remember that you need to rewrite your letter of interest wherever you're applying. And this is not only for academic jobs, for any jobs. Your CV. How to put together your CV. You all have, I'm sure, very good CVs, but is that good enough for applying for a faculty position? Maybe yes, maybe not. Many people have different CVs, one for academic career, one for practice, one for applying for grants, because in each CV you have to highlight things that are important for that particular position. So my suggestion is for you to go to your faculty web pages and see how they put together their CVs, and kind of then you understand that that's a norm in that particular field, and you can follow that norm and put together your CV based on their CVs. You have amazing faculty members at Penn State, and you definitely can use their help and follow their lead, basically. References. You need to provide at least 3 references. And you may say, okay, this is nothing, right? You can like provide 3 members of your faculty. However, I would say it's important how to choose your references. Academic environment is very kind of closed social circle, right? So people knows everyone very well. Someone may have problems with someone else. Someone may have great relationship with someone else. So you have to be strategic in choosing your references. So you might choose 3 references for one position, and change your references for another position, because you already know that, okay, this person and this person, they have great relationship, they worked with each other, they like lectured in the other institutions, they know each other, they presented with each other. So it's basically good to be strategic in picking your references. I was calling a reference for a faculty, for a position that we have at Texas Tech last week, and I knew this guy before. We had good relationship, and the way in which he basically introduced the applicant to me was excellent. So I got a better impression from that applicant, and people who knows that particular university in a better way can define the work of the applicants in a better way in that particular environment. So be strategic. Portfolio of relevant teaching, research, and creative work. So this is not the portfolio that you apply for, let's say, your MS program, because that portfolio was only your, let's say, academic work or practice work for your undergraduate or the office work. However, now you need to show the work of your students, right? So if you're teaching a studio, at the end of the semester, gather student work, talk with the co-instructor, if you're TAing, talk with the instructor, if you're co-teaching, talk with other instructor, and put together kind of a portfolio of student work, because you will need that when you're applying. You need to show that my students work like this because I teach them in a particular way. That's also very important. Teaching statement. I believe putting together a teaching statement for people in a PhD program is harder than putting together a research statement, because research statement, we all know what we're doing in a PhD program. For teaching statement, there are lots of universities that have guidelines. I particularly follow the guidelines that Cornell put together. You can search for this, writing a teaching statement. And then these are all from this particular document. You may include in your teaching statement courses you have developed or TA'd, courses that you are qualified to teach, ideas on how to structure the courses they expect applicants to teach, experience mentoring students, how you approach assessment and collect evidences of student learning, and how you basically, what feedback you got from teaching evaluations and how you approached them. What should you discuss primarily? The what, the how, and the why. What you have taught and what you are prepared to teach. Show and discuss how you approach teaching. A little on the why you teach in that certain way. Don't get philosophical. So it's very important to just a little bit talk about why you teach in that certain way. Consider what skills do you want your students to develop. Think about what kind of classes you would like to teach and why. Look at the list of courses in the advertisement or the list of courses that are offered by the department. Describe which courses you are qualified to teach. That's very important for a program to see if they want to hire you to teach only one course, or you're available and qualified to teach a wide variety of courses. Research statement. Research statement is easier for you to put together, I understand. Again, I follow Cornell University guideline, how to prepare. You can put together the funding history and potential, requirements of equipment and resources, potential research and industrial collaboration, how your research contributes to the field of architecture or landscape architecture, future direction of your research. These are things that are important in the research statement. Many of universities, especially from a couple of years ago, they ask for a statement of contribution to diversity, equity, and inclusion. You can follow the Penn State diversity, equity, and inclusion guidelines, or you can follow other universities. I use, again, Cornell's guidelines. Basically, you need to put together a statement that describe the past, present, and future aspiration to promote equity, inclusion, and diversity. It can be focused on your teaching or your research or your service or all three factors. So it's very important for you to actually use examples of how you did that or how you want to do it. So this is a kind of a chart of how a position will be advertised and a person will be chosen for that position. So now we're basically on this stage. You prepared your application and you submitted your application. So the rest is the evaluation. So most of, if not all of the positions are framed by a search committee. So a search committee will frame that position, will advertise for that position, and that search committee will evaluate your application based on the advertisement. But how? So usually most of the universities now follow a clear way of choosing applicants and reviewing applicants. So they put together a matrix. This matrix is exactly based on what the position needs and what the ad says. You can get basically scores for each one of these items. So these items will be different in, let's say, a position in computational design, a position in history and theory, or other things. So the list of things that you see here would be different. But here you can see that experiences in teaching is one thing, and then promises in teaching studio is another thing. So you may not have experience in teaching studio, but because you TA'd a studio, you're basically promising a strong way of teaching studio. And that's the same for seminars and lectures, research, the way in which you basically disseminate your research, interest in equity and inclusion. And then you have, you'll get one score from your application. And after that, you will have 2 interviews, usually. One is a Skype interview that you go through it. And then another one is a basically on-campus interview. I would like to finish this, but we can talk about it later. A great way of being prepared for the interviews or to put together your application is this book. The Professor is In. So you can read this book. There are lots of great comments here. But another important way of making yourself prepared is to talk to your faculty members. There are great faculty members at Penn State. They are all experienced in this because they went through this at least once to get to be a faculty at Penn State. And also they served in many search committees. So they know how to review other people. So they can give you tips and comments on how to do the interview. You should do a mock-up interview, Skype interview with them. You should present your work. Grid can be a great infrastructure for this. If you get an interview, do a presentation with Grid and invite faculty members, and everyone can provide you comments, especially the faculty members. So I think it's very important to start soon and to think about it and to be prepared for this process. Remember that you're applying for a position that is in the center of pedagogy, research, and practice and design. So you're not only in pedagogy, you're not only in research, and you're not only in design, you're at the center. So you need to present yourself as someone at the center. And to be able to do that, you need preparation. Thank you very much. I would be happy to answer questions. I know that I went over time, but I would be happy to answer questions now or later. You have my email address here. You can email me with any questions that you have. I mean, most of you know me very well, but for those who doesn't know me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mahyar, for such an interesting and informative lecture. I myself really enjoyed that, and I think it was great to have you here. So if you have any question, we can start with question chats. We are a little bit late here, so I have two minor questions, and I'll try to be quick. The first one is about pursuing academic career in the field of architecture. As you showed us that three intertwined circles: pedagogy, practice, and research. So for many of us, we are back to the trajectory that you defined, starting from undergrad study, MS, PhD, and then looking for job. We didn't have that chance to do like practice. I know that some of us had internship during summer, were kind of engaged with practice firms, and may have that experience, but we just take that trajectory coming from MS, PhD, and finishing that. So what's your recommendation if that practice circle for us didn't work that very well? If there is any kind of alternative that we can promote that part? So this is my first question, and
let me answer that question. So that's a great question. Not all of us are practicing architect when we apply to a post-professional degree. However, we are coming from a design-based degree, right? So we have designed things. So you can replace practice with design. So you have to be able to show that you're good at design. You're good at understanding design ideas and basically introducing your students to those design ideas, right? So that's very important. If you're applying for a, let's say, research position, right, you're focusing on your research. So there's no need to demonstrate the way in which you design or will teach students about design. But if you're going to a normal position that needs to have teaching and research and service, you will be teaching different courses. One semester you may teach only seminars focused on your area, and one semester you may teach studio. And for the search committee and for the department to understand that you're a good designer is very important. So you might not professionally practice architecture, but you may worked on some offices, you may have done some internship, as you were saying. Also, you may design buildings. You may participate in competitions, school competitions, or you can also put together a design portfolio. So that part is basically the part that you're bringing in with you from your undergraduate study. So you can use your design work. It's very common even to have design work from your academic classes. That's not uncommon.
Awesome. Then we can say we can kind of substitute that practice with our design experience at our academia, like for MS undergrad and other experience that we have. And my second question is getting back to all the requirements and documents that you mentioned to provide and apply with to academia job. So I found that, I call us COVID PhD generation. So during the past year, we didn't have that opportunity to like going to conference, making that link, seeing people, talking to them about our work, because yes, we were in touch with our faculty, but what about like kind of people from outside of our institute and our university? If we couldn't make that links and visiting them and trying to make that links, is there any other way that we can use, for the remaining part of our study, to make those links, seeing people and like being in touch with them to then later ask them to be our reference? Because we already missed that opportunity to like go into conferences.
So for references, Farzad, you need to introduce references that know you very well. So you can't put someone as your reference that you met in a conference or you met once, right? So you have to like put together a list of references that know you very well. For example, your advisor or people who are in your committee or administratives of your school, or even a colleague, right? Or let's say that you were doing internship in somewhere and your supervisor can can be that person. So not everyone needs to be academic, but my point was that if you choose that person, the reference, more strategically, you can be more successful. Let's say that you want to apply to a position at Texas Tech, right? And then you see, okay, who I should choose for my reference, right? You do a little bit of search to see who is in the search committee, who teach at Texas Tech, and then you talk with your faculty at Penn State, who knows people at Texas Tech, and then you can put together names that, okay, this person might do a better job introducing me to Texas Tech, right? It's a little bit political, but believe or not, you need to be a little bit of political in putting together your references.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
So another important thing that I want to say, Azad, about your first question. So let's say that there is a position at the university advertised for a teaching studio or teaching, let's say, professional practice for undergraduate students, right? And you're not a practicing architect. You only have your portfolio is only consists of your design work. There's no professional work. So you shouldn't apply to that position because they are looking for someone with professional experiences, right? So it's very important to read the advertisement very well, carefully, and say, okay, this is a position for me. I can apply there. This is not a position for me. I shouldn't waste my time and waste other people's time to apply.
Very nice. So is there any question from audience? If you want, you can raise your hand and ask, and also put it on chat.
So Mahyar, I have
Yeah.
a question for you. So most of us don't have at this point like service experience, university service experience. So do you have any thoughts on what we can do to help bolster that that part of that three-part
I mean,
equation?
the thing is that you think that you haven't done any services, but you have done lots of services, right? What you're doing now is a service. You're putting together a lecture to increase the knowledge about how to apply for academic positions in architecture, right? So grid itself is a service. You're doing it for free. You're part of the grid. You work with other people, right? So these are all things that you do every day, but you need to think about it. So many of these things basically are promises for your future work. You have to basically promise that I can do service work. You have to promise that I can do research work. You have to promise that I can teach. To show that promise, you use evidences of work that you have done. And for service, lots of things that you do with the community can be part of the service work. It shows that you're basically kind of a service person, so you can do that.
So it's not just university related?
Not at all, not at all.
Okay, okay. So
this is good. Next year you can apply for one of the officers for grid, Mike, if you want to do a voluntary service.
You don't have to. You don't have to be an officer of grid, right? If you are, that's important. But if you're not, that's also counts, right? You're part of this community. You're part of the community that provide this platform for everyone else. Grid is not a very large, let's say, organization that is run by a few people for everyone else. Is kind of a collaboration, right? So you being here in this room means that you're collaborating with Grid.
So when you were talking about developing your portfolio, what I taught before I came to this program, I never knew that a teaching portfolio was even such a thing. So it wasn't until after I came here, and I think it was last year when I took the the CCT or the CPAD Academy, one of the two. And they were talking about a teaching portfolio, and it really really hit me by surprise because there's so many elements in there, and it takes a long time to kind of gather these things together. So it's really great that you brought that up. And maybe have you ever seen, have you come across online teaching portfolios, or have you seen examples where people have done that and then kind of published them online for people to go to, so that they didn't have to necessarily send them out individually, and then they could just update them as time went on? What's your experience in seeing those?
So actually putting together this presentation, I looked for examples, and I found that there are many examples online. You can find them and you can follow them. But the most important thing is for you guys to put together an archive of your student work from now on, right? Couple of assignments during the semester and the final work, and that shows the development of the projects of the student. And also talk to the department and ask for the student evaluations. That's also very important. Student evaluations that shows that you were a good TA, you're a good teacher, that would be very important, right? So again, you might not you may not have experience teaching courses alone, but you're basically trying to put together something that promise that you can be a good teacher in the future.
Hi, Mahyar. I have
Hi.
a question for you. Yeah, it's a
Go ahead,
kind
please.
of quick one. So since we have so many materials that we need to prepare, right? So for example, if I'm about to graduate like next spring, so when do you recommend that I start my job hunting process? Yeah, or maybe just your big experience. How long?
Next spring, right? In a year, you want to be graduated. So I would definitely start from now. So when you're done with this semester, try to work during the summer and put together these things. Because when I started like putting together my application, basically I lost a few months doing my PhD. So I couldn't do anything because I was like only working on my application. So it takes time.
Okay. Yeah, because I feel like so I am in the stage of writing the small papers for the big dissertation. That's my concern, that which one I need to start preparing.
So it really depends on your view. Let's say that you want to be graduated in March 2022, and you want to go to a job on fall, on like August 2022, right? So so those positions will be advertised in October.
October.
Right? Only in a few months.
Okay.
In October. And you have like a month or two to apply. Therefore, you have to put together your portfolio and application material in the summer. So when you see a job, you can spend like a week to kind of twist and modify your application and send it for this job. If you see another job, put together another application, modify the same one for a week and like send it to this one.
Okay, great.
But my suggestion is preparation, being very specific about what you're going to do, and also being very specific about the job that you're selecting. So I know many people saying that, okay, apply to as many positions as possible. So first of all, you don't have time to apply to as many positions as possible. Second, you're not going to be accepted in all those positions. So when you read the ad, you will understand that this is something for me. And when you read it, you say, oh, this is not something for me, right? I can't put myself in that particular position, right?
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, is there any other questions from audience?
I see that Iram, Dario, and Panis are on. Just want to say hi.
Yeah.
Hi, Iram.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk to you guys, so I didn't have many questions.
I know. How are you
Yeah.
doing? Dario missed, I believe Dario missed his photo in the presentation, but anyway.
Yeah, I saw
Panis, how are
that.
you?
Good, good. Hi,
Good, good.
I'm good. I miss you
Excellent.
guys. So I really like this grid
Hi, Dario.
conferences. I come here.
Hey,
Hey,
Dario.
how are you? Good to
Good,
see you.
good. Very good to see you all.
You look so
Yeah.
weird without your glasses. I think I've
Oh,
never seen
yeah.
you without your glasses.
Yeah, that's when I'm looking at the screen, I don't wear them because
Yeah.
it gets difficult. Yeah, good to see you all.
Okay, perfect. It was great. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Grid, for putting this together. I'm very happy to see that Grid is active. And I know that in the pandemic era, it's hard to be active, but I'm glad that you guys are doing fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you, Mahyar, for your comprehensive talk. It was really enjoyable. I really liked it. And
My
thank
pleasure.
you for being with us. Thank you, Farzad, for moderating this session. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. We will upload the recorded meeting if anyone wants to repeat that and see what's going on. And I believe we are over time. So I want to say bye-bye to everyone and
Very
wish
good
all
to
of
see you
you
all.
a really great rest of day.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Mahyar.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mahyar.
Thanks,
Bye.
Mahyar.
Bye-bye, everyone.